you never know how much you're going to get out of yourself, and you never know how that race is going to go. So for me, there's that combination of, there's a lot of familiarity. Like at this point, I've been running for a long time and doing a lot of the same stuff, but there's a fundamental unknown that I think is essential to keep me interested in this idea that I'm finding out something new about myself every day or every time I race.
Alex Hutchinson, welcome back to the Runner's World podcast.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's great to be back after a bit of a gap.
Bit of a gap, but you've got a new book, so it's time to get you back on and discover about this one, which is fascinating. The Explorer's Gene, and a sort of what spurred you on to write this book? What was the sort of the catalyst behind this?
Yeah, so I guess the backstory is last time we spoke, I had just written a book about the limits of endurance. It was called Endure. This was 2018, and that was the culmination of, I would say, about 10 years of reporting as a science journalist about the science of endurance and trying to understand what holds us back. And the book did well, and I had a great time talking about it. And I could sort of see, staring down or staring ahead into the future, that I could kind of spend the rest of my life as the science of endurance guy.
You're right.
And that the advice I was getting from smart people was, okay, get to work on Endure too,
right,
capitalize on this.
Yeah.
And that was, I understood that this was smart advice, but it just didn't actually seem fun to me. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And I sort of got kind of hung up on this, like, why not? I spent all this time getting to this point. Why don't I just want to keep doing what I've been doing for the last 10 years? And I started to think about why we're drawn to new challenges, why we're drawn to sort of unexplored terrain. And it started to connect to a lot of other things in my life, the way I like to take vacations, and even the reason that I'm still out there training and racing and running, running on a daily basis. There's something I'm looking for, and I wasn't quite clear what it was. And so I thought, hey, let's dig into that. Let's try and understand why we're drawn to new things.
Well, you mentioned your own running, so it feels pertinent to talk about that. How is your running at the moment? Is it good? Are you enjoying it again? But in the book there's a sense of rediscovering.
Yeah, and it goes through phases. I'll say, like, I don't think that I think every runner faces this question, usually in the middle of a hard run or a race, of like,
right, yeah.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah,
and it would be nice if once you answer it once, you're like, okay, well, I've solved that problem. Like, but it's a question we face over and over again in every new way. So I would say, I've been really enjoying, over the last couple of years, I've started running cross country again, with a masters cross country. So there's a team aspect. I'm running with friends, training with friends, racing over hill and dale and mud and all that stuff, where the times have less meaning, and I'm someone who's sometimes got a little overly focused on times.
Right.
So that's where my running's at. I'm enjoying it, and I suspect if you ask me in 5 years, there'll be something else that I'll be saying, this is what I'm enjoying about running now, because it's never the same thing forever.
Is it so personally? We can talk about personally, and perhaps we can talk about a grander scale of humanity and evolution. But personally, how significant to you is variety and exploration when it comes to running, focusing, because obviously the book is very much focused on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two kind of divergent streams in my thinking, because on the one hand, I'm actually a very habit bound runner. I live actually in the house that I grew up in, right near a river with a beautiful trail, the Humber River, which has trails that extend alongside the river for miles farther than I can run in both directions, put it that way.
Right. Yeah.
And I run. I could go either direction along the river, but I run the same direction along the river virtually every morning. So I'm a guy who can handle doing the same run over and over again. So it's not that everything has to be different. I'm not like, I have friends in the age of Strava who are like, I'm going to run every
the
street in the city of Toronto, and I'm like, that's a lot of streets, and it's been like a 10-year project for them. And that's not me. I'm like, I have a nice place to run. I'm going to run there every day. So, and I have, the coach that I'm training with is the coach that I started training with when I was 15 years old in 1990. Yeah. And some of my training partners have been around nearly that long. So on the one hand, it's not that everything has to be new all the time, but there has to be some element of the unknown. There has to be the conclusion can't be foregone, and I think that's one of the reasons I still race. Is that's one of the ways. That's one thing you never know how it's going to turn out until when you step to the start line of a race. You have a sense of how fit you are. You have a sense of how fast you've run for this distance or over this course before. But there's a real fundamental unknown about racing, more so than even just going out for a typical jog on a Tuesday morning or whatever. The race, you never know how much you're going to get out of yourself, and you never know how that race is going to go. So for me, there's that combination of, there's a lot of familiarity. Like at this point, I've been running for a long time and doing a lot of the same stuff. But there's a fundamental unknown that I think is essential to keep me interested in this idea that I'm finding out something new about myself every day or every time I race.
And the book is very good at telling the tale of how people probably don't really understand that this need for variety and exploration and how that manifests within running or beyond running and just in sport or life is very much part of an evolutionary sort of event that happened with human beings. I think in the book it's about 40,000 years ago. Is that something around that?
Yeah, the dates, let's say 45 to 50,000 years ago. 40 to 50,000 years ago, there's a kind of a turning point. And yeah, I mean, when I started working on the book, I was like, why are we drawn to the unknown? Why do we have this exploring urge? And then as I got into it, I realized actually it's not clear that we do. Like there's a debate. So in the context of space exploration, for example, some people argue that humans have to explore space because that's just what we do. We explore. But there are other people that are in the same field who are like, no, like, I mean, oak trees have spread across the world, but it's not that acorns have this urge to explore. It's just, it's like you spill a glass of wine, it spreads.
Yeah.
And so one of the key questions I was trying to figure out is like, is there the call of the unknown that calls to us? And I'll try not to make this answer like 2 hours long, but basically there's, if you look at human migration patterns, there's this turning point about, let's say, call it 45,000 years ago, but plus or minus quite a bit, where instead of just sort of roaming around in Africa and the Near East and Europe, all of a sudden our ancestors just started taking off all around the globe. And they, within relatively short time, they suddenly had settled every island in Polynesia and had made it to the southern tip of South America and crossed over to the Arctic. They'd settled every habitable part of the globe. And this is quite different from other species, including the oak tree. And so there's a sense that humans were spreading not just because, there was a bad crop or bad climate conditions, or that it was getting too crowded. You don't end up on Easter Island because it's like, oh man, there's too many people over here. It takes something more to end up in the middle of the Pacific. And so that's one, this line of evidence, like something happened. And there's another line of evidence that it's like, there was a genetic mutation that shows up in humans. It looks like starting around 45 to 50,000 years ago, that changed for some people how they respond to dopamine.
Yeah.
And dopamine's a big topic these days. We're all like, I'm scrolling social media to get a hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
And dopamine is pretty complicated, actually. The picture is less simple than I thought when I started out. But
yeah, that chapter of the book is actually fascinating, but also very, very complicated.
Yeah. I mean, you have to read it slowly, and trust me, I had to write it slowly. But I think maybe a key point to make is dopamine isn't just something we get. We don't get a surge of dopamine when something is good.
Yep.
Like we get a surge of dopamine when something is better than we expected. It's a sort of prediction error marker. And so that if you drill into that, it's like that kind of suggests that we are attracted to the unknown, because how do you find things that are better than you expect? Well, you go places where you don't know what to expect. And so and you can see that this marker made some people more responsive to they got a bigger hit from finding something unexpected. And right around that time, humans started spreading around the world. And if you look at populations around the world, the farther they spread from their origins, the farther they migrated, the higher the proportion of people there who happen to have this quote unquote explorer's gene that draws them to novelty. So it's not like the genetics is complicated, and there's there's a lot of ways this could have happened. It could be, for instance, that everyone wanders out and it's just the people with the explorer's gene who are able to adapt to new circumstances better. But all of what putting that all together, what it made me think is that there's something specific to us that's different, at least in degree, compared to other species, that really drives us to look for to seek out opportunities to find something that's better than we expect, to find surprises.
And I think that on two sort of follow-ups on that, the runner's high and the idea of sort of a dopamine hit or serotonin or whatever sort of transmitter in neurons in the brain is that's sort of part and part of this. But and that sort of, I feel that in the modern era of exploration not really being part of people's lives, if we're talking about a fundamental event that happened in human evolution and the necessity to move or the want to explore, no one's exploring anymore. It's all in front of us, isn't it? So it's sort of the modern manifestation of that genome is kind of what we're seeing with people's need to do vast ultramarathons or that sort of thing. And then I think that's fascinating what comes across.
Yeah, I mean, there's this great quote from I think it was Chris Brasher who was co-founded the London Marathon, that the marathon has become the great suburban Everest. And it sounds a little dismissive in some ways, but I think there's some real truth to that we're looking for ways. No one's finding any new continents these days. We're looking for ways of testing or discovering new territory, and often that territory is kind of interior territory. It's finding out about ourselves. So we know that humans are capable of running ultramarathons, but nobody knows until they do it. I've never run an ultramarathon, so I don't know for sure that I can run an ultramarathon. And so that you can slice the salami ever thinner. You can say, I know I can run a marathon, but I don't know how fast I can run a marathon. And so there's ways of injecting discovery into every day, and to the point that I don't know if I don't have TikTok, but if I had a TikTok app, I don't know what the next video is going to come up. And so I'm discovering it. And so in a sense, I think we could argue that a lot of these things that we're maybe worried about in some contexts are hacking into that desire for novelty, but they're giving us the sensation of having explored without actually discovering anything new about ourselves or about the world. So that I think there's a kind of, to me, looking into this made me really think carefully about, okay, there's the feeling of finding something new, and then there's the actual fact of learning something new. And so those two things don't often go together, just in the same way that you can get the sensation of eating something sweet, which is evolutionarily good, but you have to think carefully about whether it's doing something good for you in the context of modern life. So you have to find productive ways of exploring, of which I would argue running is one. Well,
I think that it ties probably neatly into the sort of the growth of running right now, and perhaps this is sort of, I mean, that's a boiling, a melting pot of many, many different reasons why running's growing at the moment, and it could be all sort of, post-COVID and social media's influence and sort of brands doing well at marketing it and everything else. But there's also this sort of desire, this sort of innate desire to sort of want to move and explore, and running very openly ticks that box, and it offers people a solution to that sort of possibly subconscious need to do something like that. And I think that's very interesting, that there is a sort of innate sense of like, I must achieve something, and then and as you say with social media, perhaps that's ticking the box for people. But how does that leave us from an evolutionary point of view? What are we going to do?
Yeah, I feel like it's the social media version of exploring is the equivalent of eating or trying to survive on artificial sweetener. It's like in the moment it feels like you're satisfying some deep urge, but it actually hasn't given you what you were chasing with that urge. So I think running and activities like it, as people discover that they're eating all this artificial sweetener without getting satisfied, they're looking for ways of sorry, this metaphor is getting a little twisted, but running is a more satisfying way of consuming, or of you don't just get the feeling of something new. You're actually discovering something new about yourself and it's interesting how running there's the internal the sense of discovering what you can do, but actually when you go out for a run, there's also the physical geographical exploration element too. And so it's, for me, running the same route every day is maybe not the best example of that, but often we get to explore new territories. And it's certainly like whenever I travel or if I go meet up with a friend for a run, I'm seeing cities, I'm seeing places, I'm seeing parks in a way that I never would have seen without it. So it also allows us to kind of get out there and cover the country in a very literal form of exploration.
There was an interesting example in the book where you talk about the two brothers migrating from Mexico to America, and the second brother follows the first, and his sort of life is in sort of change, and he has a reason to migrate, and that the first brother actually was wonderfully settled and had a lovely existence and chose to migrate anyway because it was kind of new and different. And that was quite interesting in that sort of, there's almost like the perils of this notion of exploration and how people can, and how that manifests into sort of making life decisions based on a sort of urge to do more than is actually necessary. And how running really, people can get very obsessed with running and it becomes far more of the sort of, I must do it more and more and more to the detriment of other things. What did you find in the book? How did the sort of that narrative play out? What did you discover in terms of people's need to explore and then sort of to the downfall of everything else?
Yeah. So I think we're very good at coming up with reasons for why we have just done the things we've just done. Right. And so, running, it might be like, oh yeah, I run because I need to be healthy. That's why I have to run every day or I'll kill someone. It's like, it's just, I need to be healthy. Like, I'm not obsessed. Yeah. And with migration, there's a huge academic literature on why people choose to migrate, and we can easily understand it on a rational level. It's like people migrate for economic opportunity or for safety for their families or, whatever the case may be. But then, you think, yeah, and that's why 20% of the people in that town that I was writing about migrated. But it's like, but 80% didn't. And so everyone is facing, or, there might be a large group of people facing exactly the same external circumstances, and some choose to migrate and some don't. So then it's like, there's something personal that is putting your finger on, and even within a given family, some people choose to migrate and some don't. And so what is, so the rational reasons apply to everyone, but people are actually following their own instincts. And there's some, I talked about this, explorer's gene earlier, this idea that some people are wired to just get a bigger hit from novelty. And there's some evidence a little bit of evidence that migration patterns follow this kind of habit, that people aren't just sort of saying, well, my economic opportunities here are this, but they might be that, therefore I'm going. It's that they're actually like, I got to go. I want to check this out. And then they're coming up with a reason. One of the great examples of that is there's this fascinating analysis of Scandinavian migration to the United States in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Millions of Scandinavians migrated. They have very good records of who migrated. They have the lists of ship passengers and the census data. And the pattern is that people who migrated tended to have unusual first names. And so there's something about, so they figure unusual first names are a marker of growing up in a family that prioritized individualism or, not just sticking with the same old stuff. And so this is, so you can say this has something to do with why they migrated. It's not just that the crop wasn't good. It's also that they're in a family where they don't want to call everyone Johan. They're coming up, they're making up their own names, and they're also going to go make up their own lives by traveling to the frontier in the United States. Yeah. And so there's, I think we all have a similar level of urge, but some people have a stronger helping, and those might be the people who are like, yeah, no, marathon, that's not far enough. I'm going to try 100-miler. I'm going to try and do it over a mountain or whatever the case may be.
On the migration point, did you discover any sort of great running nations that we view, like maybe the sort of the East Africans or anything like that that would correlate with these? I think it's there was some the DRD4 gene and how that was very present in like cultures and that migrated more than others? Is there any is there any correlation with?
That's a fascinating question. I actually haven't seen any analysis that compares like Olympic, or world cross country rankings with DRD4. That would be interesting. There is a little bit of data that suggests that in nomadic cultures, the levels. So in a given area, groups that are nomadic tend to have higher levels of DRD4 genes than groups that have settled down into agriculture. And so one could hypothesize that probably nomadic cultures may have given rise to great running cultures, because especially if you're doing persistence hunting. But I haven't actually checked whether like the Kalenjin tribe in Kenya has a high level. That's actually, hey, maybe I should go back to university and do a PhD in this, because that would be a fascinating
Explorers
result.
Gene 2 is coming soon, and it's
I got to move on to another topic. I'm going to be writing about like how to make violins or something like that.
But I did think this is because I think that. I mean, maybe it just pleases my brain, but there's a lot of stuff about this, the sort of the evolution of people, and how I think as runners we can, Born to Run immediately presented everyone with this notion of great skill and acquisition from an early age, and it was, from the dawn of time we've been able to do all this stuff. But when you sort of really boil down into the sort of the guts of it all, it is fascinating that there is perhaps this innate sense in some others than more than others, and maybe and the explorer gene is the sense of actually that. It's the reward and then the other elements that kind of come into it that are affecting you without you really understanding it. And I really love that idea that people are finding running and perhaps their bodies are, and their actual DNA is telling them like you're going to really enjoy this. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, and I mean those of us who are running journalists like you like you and me. We like to think that we can present all these rational reasons why one should take up running. That's
I'm convincing myself.
You take up running, you're gonna get these mental health benefits, you're gonna get these physical benefits, you're gonna get this, you're gonna get that. But you're right. I think that what really hooks people, that I think that's a good. We offer people a way in the door to discover running, but the people who stick with it, I think for the most part, aren't like those guys were right. Alex and Ben were right. My cholesterol levels are better. Therefore, I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life. I think there's something more to that. I think actually it is tapping into something deeper that we can't always articulate. And that I'm generally, as a rule, suspicious of people, including myself, who think they know why they do what they do. I think there's often a deeper layer of kind of responses that we're following.
Yeah, I think so too. I completely think so. In a world that's increasingly sort of online and indoors, how important do you think it is to sort of to show the next generations, or to sort of continue educating people on the powers of getting outside and exploring, and not just sort of from the obvious things, but just almost at a very sort of perhaps dramatic level, the sort of maintaining the human race in terms of its sort of continuing on a positive evolutionary sort of track.
Yeah, one of the distinctions that I got interested in was that the distinction between passively exploring and actively exploring, because a lot of when I'm going on and on about the joys of just finding something that's better than you expect, or learning something new about the world. I mean, you can learn a lot about the world from your social media app, God forbid, or by, so like, I guess a way of explaining it is like, what's the difference between climbing Mount Everest on your own, or being guided and or pulled up by an expert team of Sherpas, so that you don't have to do any planning or know the route or know anything. You just have to sort of be there, or watching a documentary and narrated by David Attenborough about climbing Everest. And the truth is, you'll probably know more about Everest and have a better picture of the landscape, and have more sort of tidbits to drop into cocktail conversation by watching the documentary. And so is that better? Is that a better form of exploring? And intuitively, I don't think so. And so then I had to ask myself, like, what is the difference? What's the difference between being a driver in a car and a passenger in a car? And there's a lot of evidence or a lot of research looking at that question. And it's like, yeah, you ask someone who drives in an area versus someone who's habitually a passenger. You ask them to draw a sketch map of the city, or you ask them questions about what's in that area. The driver knows the area way better than the passenger. The passenger is kind of tuned out, doesn't need to pay attention, they may be driven on that route, any number of times, thousands of times, but they still don't actually know where they're going. And this is true for kids going to and from school. They've done studies of like, hey, kid, draw me a map of your neighborhood. And those who walk to school can draw much better maps of their neighborhood than those who are driven to school. Their maps tend to be like, here's my house, here's a line that represents my route, and here's the school. That's all they know. Yeah. And so my feeling is that in society in general, and not just since the dawn of the internet, but over in recent decades, has trended more and more from active to where, like, we go out and do things, to passive, we watch other people do things. And that's like, 50 years ago, every town had a town band, every town had a local football team, every town had not just for the kids, but adults were doing things, were entertaining themselves. And now, as society has changed, we're much more likely to let's everyone watch the 10 people in the world who are really, really, really good at singing or playing this sport or doing whatever. And so, sorry, this is a long manifesto, but no, I guess the key point is I agree with the premise of your question, which is that I think we're heading down a bad path if we don't get out there and do things ourselves. And I think running is a great example of a sport that is more participatory than spectator. As much as I love watching elite running, but the special thing about running to me is that I participate in it, and I go out there and I explore for myself.
No, but on your example, like there's obviously talent shows on telly, and everyone watches them and wants to see who the best singer is, but they don't want to sing themselves. Whereas if you end up watching running, majority of the time, those watching running will be runners. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of like there's the two don't correlate in terms of there might be singers watching those shows and think, oh, I want to do it because I'm a great singer. But a lot of the time we seek out to watch the running because we are runners, I think, rather than the other way around. And I think that's a topic of great angst for people who promote professional running. It's like, come on, we've got all these millions of runners around the world. Why don't they want to watch, the track meet? I'm like, I like watching the track meet, but I'm actually not sad about this situation. I would far rather be in a sport that struggles to put, bums in seats for elite sport, but that everyone gets out and does it on a Sunday morning, than in a sport that everybody watches on TV, but hasn't played since they were, 14 or whatever. Yeah, exactly. You mentioned Everest, and that got me kind of thinking around exploration and kind of the exploitation of exploration and that sort of, these you say you can turn up. We don't have to do any carrying. Sherpas will do everything for you, but you're still exploring and to the detriment of that location or the environment or the culture or whatever it is. How does that fit in with the book and also the sort of the everything that you came across? Or if I had to sort of rank, what's a greater accomplishment, discovering Everest or watching a documentary? It's obvious. This is what my opinion is. Yeah. But I think that doesn't mean that if you don't like climb Everest by yourself blindfolded, you're not meaningfully exploring. There's a concept that I get into, which is called I don't know if I can pronounce this right, the Wundt curve. Let's call it just the Wundt curve. Where this is an English podcast. There's a psychologist named Wilhelm Wundt, whatever, who is really one of the early pioneers of psychology in the late 1800s, and he proposed this curve that relates stimulus and response, basically. So how complicated or how unknown or unexpected or intense a stimulus is versus how much we like it. And it's basically kind of like a bell curve. If something is too simple or obvious or easy, it's boring to us. If something is too hard or complex or unpredictable, then it's like, listening to a play in Norwegian if you don't speak Norwegian. It's like, it's very complicated, but that doesn't make it more interesting because we don't have a clue what's going on. And there's a sweet spot in the middle where things are neither too easy or obvious, but also not too hard or complicated or difficult. And we're all looking for that sweet spot in the middle where something is,
challenging but attainable. And that's different for everybody, and it changes, and it's different throughout our lives. So look, there are absolutely what for one person might be a boring, obvious, easy, not particularly meaningful exploration might for someone else be the experience of a lifetime, just depending on their context, what their prior experience is, what they know, what their abilities are. So it's not the intrinsic nature of a particular activity that makes it a good or bad exploration, but it's about finding something that challenges you, that is not easy. So if you're going,
running's perfect, isn't it? Like if you look at someone's ambition to run a mile, just to run a single mile from zero, is the hardest thing they've ever overtaken. Whereas anyone who's been running for a while will be like, just running a mile's easy. But the two things are exactly the same if you think about it.
Yeah, or like if you want to, like, so I came up as a middle distance runner. So I ran mostly like 1500, 5K, that kind of thing. And for most of my career, I hadn't run a marathon. And so people were like, could you run a marathon? And it's like, the question of whether I could run a marathon is not interesting to me at all, because I'm used to doing like 35 kilometer long runs and quite hard. I know I can run 42 kilometers.
Yeah.
How fast can I run it? Now that gets an interesting question. Whereas for me, completing it was too low on my Wundt curve. There's no uncertainty. In the same way that like for Eliud Kipchoge, it's like to go, can he run a marathon in 2:20? Yeah, totally uninteresting. Can he run a marathon in 1:50? Also totally uninteresting, because we know he can't.
Yeah.
Can he run a marathon in 2 hours or 2:01 or something? That's interesting, so this maps onto the ideas that have been around for things like the concept of flow. One of the preconditions of flow is it's like you have a challenge that's just at the edge of your capacity. So it's not obvious. It's not obvious whether you can complete it. And this goes back to the idea of exploring, that you need fundamental uncertainty, that you don't know how something is going to turn out for it to be interesting. Right. So, being carried up Everest, with Everest, there's always some fundamental uncertainty, because you don't know whether there's going to be like an ice fall, but that's actually not particularly, that's random uncertainty. It's not uncertainty about whether you're good enough. It's uncertainty about whether the weather will be good enough. So I think finding things that challenge you at whatever level that happens to be, is something that running is, as you say, it's remarkably well suited to. It's a totally flexible challenge. The challenge is exactly what you choose it to be. But it's important to find these things that nobody likes. We all like winning in sports, but nobody likes playing. If you're a team that wins 21-0 every game you play, that's not interesting either. No, we all want challenge.
I mean, in your book, you wrote every run is a voyage of discovery, and I really like that as a sentiment. Just that we were talking, on the grand scheme of this, and I feel like we've scratched the surface, but there's so much in the book in terms of how deeper this goes. But I think just that nice soundbite of every run is a voyage of discovery really sort of sums up how these two worlds intertwine with the sort of the world of exploration and then from our standpoint, running.
Yeah, and a journey or a voyage of exploration, and one that will somehow, in some way, every good run has some challenge in it, and that I think that's true of exploration too, and that's part of what makes it so satisfying.
Alex, thank you so much for your time. Where is the book out? Can people get hold of it?
The book is out. It exists at all fine bookstores, and you can. If my website is alexhutchinson.net, and I have a bunch of links there to where you can order, depending on where various places you can order from.
Fantastic. And it's on social media, Alex, to encourage people more with their get their dopamine hit.
Forget social media. Go out and go running. But Perfect. if you must, my handle is Sweat Science on things like X and stuff, and it's Sweat_Science on Instagram. So it's a bit of a mess, I'll admit. I didn't stake my claim early enough in the social media.
Too busy running. Too busy
That's
exploring.
Right. Yeah. It's second priority for sure.
Alex, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
If you haven't heard already, Runners World has got a club.
That's right, 30 years in the making, the Runners World Club is here to take your running even further.
And as our dedicated viewers, listeners and fans, let's say fans, we wanted to tell you more about it. So we've got a guest here to talk about it.
That's right. We're here with our friend and colleague Jen Bazon, Membership Director, to learn more. So Jen, tell us, what exactly is the Runners World Club?
So Runners World Club is our best ever brand experience and gives readers access to a multitude of benefits, experiences and rewards in addition to receiving the print magazine every month. And a membership to Runners World Club really does give you everything you could possibly need to get fitter, faster and healthier.
You could do with a bit of that.
Me? Yeah. Does sound good, actually, yeah.
Yeah. What do people get, Jen? What is included in a membership?
So we've got 3 different tiers of membership: bronze, silver and gold. And our gold membership is our sort of top tier, all singing, all dancing membership. And with that, you get access to our brand new training plan library via our reimagined companion app. You get access to award-winning training platform Final Surge, which gives you the ability to sync Runners World plans with your training devices. So with your Garmin, Apple Watch, Sunto, Polar, whatever your kind of preference. And that means that you can follow training sessions in real time on your watch with guided prompts. So it saves you having to sort of memorise interval sessions and things like that, as it's all programmed into your watch. You also receive our monthly print magazine, our weekly Runners World Club newsletter, and you get full access to the reimagined companion app, where you can access discounts and deals from running and fitness brands, and you also get access to exclusive gold member only content. So it's jam-packed with benefits.
And there are these live events, aren't there? Spencer Matthews was seen on last weekend with Runners World, and Susie Chan. So tell us about those.
Yes, very exciting. So what we wanted to do with membership was give our members the chance to meet and get to know each other, as well as the Runners World team and celebrity guests as well. So yeah, we hosted our first event the day before the London Marathon with Spencer Matthews, Susie Chan at the Samsung store in King's Cross, and it was a lot of fun. We had 85 runners there, and we did a shakeout run and Q&A, and it was very exciting, and the feedback was brilliant. So we're already excitedly planning our next one.
Excellent.
Let's get into the guts of this. Training plans.
Yes.
It's going to be the main draw. Lots of people have probably used the Runners World training plan across their many years of running. What are the training plans looking like?
Yeah, so our training plans have been written by Tom Craggs, Robbie Britton and Georgia Wood, and we've produced this brand new library which you can get via the app, and they span from 5k to ultramarathon. And what's really brilliant is runners now have the ability to customise those plans according to their training preferences. So if you want to, say you've got a marathon coming up in 20 weeks' time and you're targeting 3 hours, 45 minutes, and you want to do 3 to 4 runs per week, you just put that into the filter and you'll be served a tailored plan. And in addition to that, every 4 weeks in those plans, there's the opportunity to kind of reflect on how your training's going and choose an alternative plan if it's not quite working out. So say that kind of 3:45 time goal was a little bit punchy, you can sort of change to 4 hours. So that self-reflection kind of ensures you sort of are following the plan that is actually right for you.
Right, I want in. How do I join?
So you can join by clicking the link in the episode description or searching Runners World Club and signing up via the Hearst Magazine's website. And it's priced at $9.99 for your first 3 months, which is an absolute bargain.
A steal.
That is an absolute deal.